Well, he's the host of one of the world's most downloaded podcasts, but Adam Carolla says that Hollywood's fiddling with irrelevant cancel culture issues while the world burns from real stuff like the threat of Putin, global food shortages and the cost of living crisis. And Adam Carolla joins me now. Adam, great to have you on Piers Morgan Uncensored. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
I can't think of anybody better equipped to appear on a show called Uncensored than you. Where do you see the world right now? Because I've got a theory that the pandemic, now war, other seismic events have basically sent a lot of people completely nuts, destroyed our perspective. You have culture wars raging as real wars are raging. And you're based in Hollywood, the kind of epicenter of hypocrisy in many ways, and also in lacking perspective.
Yeah, well, it is, may you live in interesting times, somebody once said. And I think maybe they're too interesting right now. Hollywood is, the land of make-believe. There's no real problems that people in Hollywood have, but they do manufacture a lot of problems. And so you have to sort of live. I mean, if you think about Los Angeles is, Malibu and Beverly Hills and the Palisades and these multi-million-dollar homes and multi-millionaires. And then you have homeless people just living in their own filth on the ground. And that's kind of where we're at. The middle is kind of gone. We have ultra poor and ultra rich. And maybe that's sort of a metaphor for, where we're at in a society. We have the Ukraine on one side, and then on the other side, we have a Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, and it's all competing for our attention.
And when you involve social media in this, which didn't exist, when you and I, like 20 years ago, you didn't have social media. But now social media seems to me to have whipped everybody into an almost permanent state of tribalism. You have to belong to a tribe, and then regardless of facts, you have to just stick with the tribe, whatever it may be. And that might be about Trump, or it might be about Brexit over here, or it might be about Putin and Ukraine. It might be about, vaccines, whatever it is. Very tribal now, this debate in public, and very visceral and toxic.
Yeah, I agree. And it's also intellectually disingenuous. You take COVID. I live in California. We're still under an emergency order. We locked everyone down. We shut down all the small businesses. We shut down all the schools. And if I raise my hand and say, hey, I got a couple of kids and they're in high school and you just sent them home for a year and a half, I don't think there's a real danger here for young, healthy people. Maybe schools should be open. Then you become a COVID denier. That's where we're living, as if anyone is denying COVID. What even is a COVID denier? Have you met a human being that denies COVID? I'm not a COVID denier. I'm a COVID realist. I believe you should shut down the, old age homes or the nursing homes, or take precautions with the, medical first responders and blah, blah, blah. But don't shut the schools down. And, I have elderly parents. They should get vaccinated. My 13-year-old son shouldn't get vaccinated. Why does that make me a denier?
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about the pandemic, and I saw this with many other issues, is that people got extremely self-righteous about their positions on this and simply wouldn't change when facts changed. I think there was an argument very early on in the pandemic for lockdowns purely on the basis that nobody knew what we were dealing with, and a lot of people were dying very quickly. But the moment we got into a territory of successful vaccines and therapeutics, I changed my mind about that and saw no need to ever do a lockdown again on COVID, because we now had proper protection. But I saw so many people who couldn't get out of being almost hysterical about lockdowns, as they were about masks and so on. Almost driven again by a fear of changing their mind because facts had changed.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of there's definitely psychosis going on, and most of it is narcissism. I mean, all roads just lead to narcissism. Most of these people you're dealing with are insane narcissists. Some are politicians who are trying to rewrite history, but mainly it's people who are just wrong, who don't want to go back, and they certainly don't like it when you point that out. And if you think about most of the people that got thrown off of Twitter or many of these other platforms for ideas they had about COVID, most of them were right about 2 weeks later after they were thrown off of these platforms. So we are living in this sort of mass denial now, and I don't know if how virulent it is in Britain, but in the United States, it is something to deal with.
Well, it's getting that way here about everything. I want to talk to you also about cancel culture. You haven't been cancelled. You've got a hugely successful podcast, but you've certainly run foul of Hollywood, because if you don't play the rules that they set down and you really want to exercise your right to free speech and to have your own opinions, that doesn't lead to much popularity in Hollywood.
No, they are probably as hived off as any group there is. You know, if you really think about groups, you think about Republicans and Democrats and progressives and conservatives or what have you, right to lifers, women's rights, you know, all that. But Hollywood is as lockstep as a group is ever going to get on just about every social issue. And the second you run afoul of them, or you cross that line, or you have any opinions that vary from theirs, then they lock you out. And they want to deplatform you, and they'd like to remove you from your livelihood. These are the same people that never stop complaining about McCarthyism, practicing it in real time. Right. So, of course, they're hypocrites.
Were you encouraged at all by the way Spotify, in the end, stood by Joe Rogan and Netflix stood by Dave Chappelle? Did you feel a slight wind turning?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we'd hit our saturation point, and it's unfortunate that we have to hit our saturation point before the ship starts to turn around. You know, I've said that a million times. It's sort of like New York in the 70s and the early 80s had to be so dangerous and so crime-ridden that at some point they bottomed out, and then they went and changed direction and went more law and order. And California is in the process of bottoming out, and then will change direction and head towards something that is more pragmatic and makes sense. But as I say all the time, why do we have to bottom out? Why can't we just see where this is going in advance and go, hey, I think I've seen enough here.
Yeah, I completely agree.
We had to sort of bottom out. And now that we've kind of bottomed out, and there's an economic, you know, aspect to it, Netflix, Disney, whomever, they've realized that alienating half the country is probably not a great business model.
Well, especially when your sense of morality doesn't extend to outside of America. So you'll go to war with Florida and a governor there over a supposed anti-gay bill, which never says anti-gay, but you won't say anything in protest about the oppression of Uyghur Muslims in China because you want the box office. You won't stop streaming to countries where it's literally illegal to be gay. And I think it's the double standard on the morality, which I find so ridiculous.
100% correct. You know, the NBA does it, Disney does it, Hollywood does it. Yes, they'll attack Hobby Lobby for not providing the morning after pill for their employees or something, but they have nothing to say about Middle Eastern cultures that are throwing gays off the rooftops of buildings and killing them.
Now, you talked about changing minds and reflecting perhaps on staunchly held opinions, which you then revised. I wanted to play you an opinion that you expressed in 2011, Adam. Listen to this.
Who's Piers Morgan, by the way, and who decided in advance we're all in love with this limey? He's okay. I mean, Piers, you want to keep going? I'm better than Piers Morgan. You're better than Piers Morgan. Why is this thing like nobody can do what I do? Shut up, you blowhard. Hey, we have chubby guy in his 50s from England who we've never heard of. Fever.
Now, Adam, I want to give you the chance to repent. Or double down.
I knew that was coming, Piers. I knew it was coming. All right. First things first, I like you. Secondly, I didn't know who you were back then. Thirdly, I was blindsided by that question. That was not in our rundown. He just pulled that out of his butt in the last second.
I only have one complaint. I was not
tangent.
in my 50s when you said that, but I am now. That's my only complaint. The rest of it falls under my umbrella of free speech. You gave a perfectly honestly held opinion at the time that I was a blowhard you'd never heard of, and you actually went on to say I should be driven out of town and sent back to London, which is where I'm speaking to you from now.
Very prescient of me.
Adam, it's great to talk to you. I'm a big fan. I love the way that you go about your business. I love the way you speak your mind. I love your podcast. It's a great honour to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Piers.